Hey everybody, this is Elisa. I am making this video as a testimony to Jesus Christ and what he's done to my heart and to my life, which to me is just the most incredible thing that's ever happened to me. I already made a testimony before. Actually, I made a two-part testimony out of chronological order, which is why I'm doing this new one. For those of you who've already seen this, there might be some new things in here that I didn't add in the other ones, but I'm doing this new one just to put it all in chronological order. So this time I'm going to start at the beginning in my childhood. I'm going to tell you about my life before and my problems because if you don't know about any of that, you're not going to understand how much Jesus changed me. So when I was a child, I don't really know what age, a small child, I had problems at home, and somewhere around that time was when I remember first having feelings that I can only describe as loneliness and alienation from others, and I guess you could call it shyness at that age. I probably was shy, but I had, the problems at home were kind of causing other things to start happening in me. And so going up into my early teens, I started getting involved with girls sexually when I was about 13 years old. And also around that time, I, as I got older and older, those feelings of isolation and loneliness and alienation turned into depression. But it's such a gradual process that I don't know at what age I started to be depressed. But those feelings were already there as a child in one form or another, just mild. So when I was in my early teens, it started to get worse, of course, as unchecked depression does. And let's see, I made a list because there's a lot and I don't want to forget anything. That around that time also is when I started to become antisocial, like that shyness that I had as a child, just kind of progressed as I got older to antisocialism. I just wouldn't really talk to people unless, it was to get involved with somebody. And during my teens, the depression got more and more intense. There was regular episodes of crying, sometimes a lot. Anybody that has suffered from depression or knows somebody that suffered from depression, you know what I mean when I say any little thing can just set you off spiraling down into the darkness of depression. Like, it just, the wrong tone of voice that somebody's speaking to you in, just a sideways glance from somebody, your head just goes crazy. It just sets you off, and then you could be, in that darkness for who even knows how long. So during my teens, that started to get worse. And also during my teens, I developed a stealing addiction, which is one of the more serious problems that popped up. I mean, it was compulsive stealing. I would steal from my jobs, from my family, from relatives, like from anywhere. It was compulsive and it was addiction. Like, it was anything and everything. I stole from retail stores. I stole all kinds of clothing and like watches and like all kinds of stuff, and I got away with it from the stores. I don't even know how. I was never caught. I to this day I don't understand how I wasn't caught. It was just all the time, and this went on for years, so it wasn't just my teens. So let me see. Yeah. So also during my teens, I definitely started to become angry all the time and hate everybody. I just hated everybody. Angry all the time and hated everybody. You may think that's normal for a teenager, but I'm telling you, to this degree, it's not normal. You know, some people can call it teen angst, but there's a point where it goes beyond that. And I could find something to hate like that about even the nicest person. Like, it was because I was so miserable and I had my own problems, and I was so unhappy with myself. I just projected that outward toward everybody else, basically. And I was also very promiscuous. Like I said, I went from relationship to relationship. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned that yet, but I did. I went from relationship to relationship, not serious ones, you know, like relationships in quotes. Just desperately looking for love. I would cheat on people. I had no morals. I didn't care who I hurt. I only thought about myself. But when I got hurt, it was a big deal. You know what I mean? Not when I hurt other people. So, just very selfish, very just in my own world about my own problems and not seeing anybody else's problems, not caring about how my decisions or my words toward them affected them. So let's see. In my early 20s, the depression got way worse. It was very intense by this time. Lots of crying. I would have, you know, episodes of depression. Again, if you've had depression, you understand what I mean. You have episodes of depression. It gets crippling. Like, the crying episodes, the hopelessness, the powerlessness, the loneliness is so intense. It's unbearable. It can lay you out for hours. Like, I remember just being in the bed, not moving for I don't even know how long. And when you have episodes, they can last hours, they can last days, they can last weeks. For some people, maybe months. It's just is so horribly crippling. And also in my early 20s, I developed a pornography addiction, which may make a lot of people uncomfortable, but it is an absolutely extremely common, widespread problem. And when I say addiction, I mean addiction. Like, you know, it started in my early 20s, and it very quickly turned into my life. I mean, like, every day, multiple times a day, at home, at my jobs, like, whenever I could get a moment, you know. It was just, it's called an addiction for a reason. It rules your life. And also, in my early 20s is when I had my first thoughts of suicide. And I didn't do anything about it. I just had my first thoughts. That's when it first started. It should have been a huge red flag, but of course I had so many problems and was just so messed up inside that I did not see it as a red flag. I know that sounds crazy to some people, but I didn't. The rest of my 20s is lost in a haze of alcoholism. I don't have a lot of memories from my 20s because I was always drinking. I would drink morning, noon, and night. I would drink vodka. I had random jobs, multiple relationships, you know, that whole kind of life. I was miserable. I was heavily miserable. And then in my late 20s, I was very suicidal to the point where I planned out my suicide. I had letters written to my parents and everything. I had everything planned out, okay? It was that serious. And that day, all I was doing was waiting for a car that I was going to borrow to go do what I was going to do. And during that time, somebody that I couldn't stand, that I hated, of course I hated everybody, but they were around and they came up to me and they touched me and they started to pray for me. Now I just want to mention here that my whole life I was an atheist. Okay? I was brought up Catholic, but that's another long story. I wasn't brought up My home life did not reflect it. That's all I'm gonna say. So that's why it was so easy for me to not believe in God. If you say you believe in God and Jesus and you act in a completely hypocritical way that's contrary to what he teaches, it's going to destroy your child's view of God. And that's what it did to me. Um, so I was atheist. I did not believe in God or Jesus, nor did I want to. I had no interest. I used to make fun of it. Okay? This was something I was adamantly against. I never thought about it. It wasn't even remotely a possibility for me. I had no interest. So anyway, going back to that day when I was waiting to get the car to go do what I was going to do, this person prayed for me. And when they did that, immediately, within seconds, within a few seconds, immediately, I felt every bit of the desire to kill myself leave my body. And left me feeling just empty of that desire. It's so hard to put into words, okay? I was so dumbfounded after that person left, and I was thinking about it and just kind of in shock. I actually thought, did God do that to me? You know, I actually had that thought. It was that impossible that something like that would happen to me. I mean, we're talking about years and years and years of depression building up to being suicidal, just gone like that because somebody touched me and said a prayer. Okay? For somebody who doesn't believe in God, I mean, I don't know what kind of effect that would have on other people. Maybe it would make some people believe right away. For me, I hate to say it, I really do, but I brushed it off and I turned my back and I walked away and I continued with my sinful life. So in my early and mid 30s after that, the suicide thing happened when I was I think I was 28 or 29. So in my early and mid 30s, you know, like I said, I went on with my life, same problems, same addictions, getting more and more frequent, more and more intense. The pornography addiction was totally out of control. The stealing was out of control. Lots of depression, lots of crying. The anger and hatred was out of control. I got to be a darker and darker person, physically too. I started wearing all black. I got like a black faux hawk. I had like tattoos. I just wore black all the time. It was like I was, without knowing it, outwardly expressing how I felt inside. It wasn't intentional. It's just what I did. I just started feeling darker and darker and darker inside. So I'm gonna stop and explain one more thing. Since I was a child at some point, again, I don't know at what age this started, I started having what I referred to as nightmares because I didn't know otherwise what they were. They would be very intense and very scary, and I remember, you know, multiple times the day after I would have one of these nightmares, I would be like in school or whatever, and during the day I'd just be in a daze because that's the effect they had on me. They were so terrible. And this continued through my teenage years and in my 20s. And in my early 30s, it started getting much worse and more frequent. And I'll try to describe what it felt like. It's really hard to put into words. It's called sleep paralysis. For any of you who may or may not have heard of it, there's medical explanations for it, but My experience proves that it's not a medical condition at all, it's a spiritual condition. So basically, what I felt like when I would have, I call them attacks because that's basically what they are. You are in bed. I mean, for me, they happened at night. They can happen any time that you're sleeping, though. It doesn't matter if it's day or night. Um, but basically, I want to say you'd be sleeping, but you're not sleeping. You're awake. And you know every fiber of your being that you're awake. It's a completely different feeling than a lucid dream, by the way. In a lucid dream, you can maybe think that you're awake too. But this is different. You'd have to experience it in order to actually understand it. You know that you're awake. And what I would feel was evil presences. And I mean evil in a way that you've never felt evil in this world. When I felt those things approaching me, I didn't have to see them. You could feel them approaching you. And you can feel the intensity of the evil. And again, you have to understand this came from somebody who didn't believe in good or evil, God or the devil. I didn't believe in any of that, okay? And yet I was still experiencing what I knew was evil presences. Something in me knew through and through that's what it was. Even though it's something I didn't believe in life. When I felt them near me, I could immediately understand everything that people do in the world to each other, all the horrible ways. I know it's gruesome to talk about, but it's the reality. All the gruesome ways that people have to torture each other, like in war, you know, things that go on in third world countries, things that go on in this country that you don't hear about. I mean, like all the evil, sick things that people do to each other. You understand immediately that this is the source. Okay, and that's the only way I can put it into words. I wish I could explain it better, but I can't. It's the worst. You don't ever want to feel it. You don't ever want to feel it again. It's the worst feeling I've ever felt in my life. Leagues beyond depression or feelings of suicide. It's just it's otherworldly. So in the year of 2014, leading up to November of 2014, the several months before that, I started having these attacks more frequently and more intensely. And it got so bad in November that I couldn't sleep anymore. So basically what happened is I went to see a movie with somebody and it had to do with outer space, which was fascinating to me, and this led him to suggest that we watch an alien documentary, which usually I got scared of that kind of stuff. I'm not really into that kind of stuff, but I watched it anyway. And to my astonishment, there's a lot of accounts of alien abductions. Like, yeah, okay, sometimes you can tell this person is not for real or whatever. But there were some people in that documentary that were describing exactly what I had been going through to a T. And I was really caught off guard and extremely disturbed because I didn't think any of this was real. Like, yeah, I could sense these evil presences, but at the same time, I didn't think it was real, or didn't know it was real. I hadn't heard it from anybody else. And I didn't know it was called sleep paralysis yet. I didn't look up anything. I just whatever. I'd been experiencing it for so long. It was what it was. But here I have these people describing the same exact things with the same exact feelings that I was going through. And that really caught my attention. And it was either that documentary or something else I saw that they were talking about how people there's some very isolated cultures in the world that have no contact with like outside civilization, and then until they do, and they're interviewed, and they're questioned by other people, and they also had these same experiences, like before they had contact with the outside world. So that really got my attention too, that they were having the same experiences and same feelings that I was having during these attacks. Like that was impossible if it wasn't real, so that's what that said to me. And so I freaked out. I at the possibility of this being real and me not really knowing for sure what it was. Like, is this aliens? Like, what aliens are real? I don't know. I just started freaking out. I started depriving myself of sleep all night, all day. I wouldn't sleep. I did this for 3 nights, almost 3 nights. And this happened during, like I said, November 2014, and then it was over a period of like 1 week, where we saw that movie, and I first started to realize after seeing that documentary that people were having the same experiences, and then I started getting scared and staying up, and then I guess toward the middle of that week, that's when I spoke to somebody else who actually had the same experience as I did. And this was different because I talked to a real person. I wasn't watching a documentary. Like, I talked to somebody that I knew, and he'd had the same experience a long time ago. So that really that really solidified for me that something was going on, that was happening to me, and it was real. And my husband at the time looked up my issues like online. He went online somewhere and found this whole thing on sleep paralysis. So I was like, okay, what is this? And they're talking about the medical explanations for it, and then there are also demons. That was the other explanation. And of course I didn't want to believe that, because I didn't believe in stuff like that. I didn't believe in good or evil or God or the devil or demons or anything like that. I never even considered demons. In my whole life, I never even thought about them. Sorry, it's a little intense talking about this again. So I remember, reading a lot online about the medical explanations for sleep paralysis, and this is also hard to explain. They just did not make sense to me at all inside. Like, I tried to cling to them so hard. I so wanted to believe that it was something medical and had nothing to do with something supernatural. I really clung to these medical theories, even though there was something in me that was telling me that it wasn't true, that it didn't make sense. And so I kept doing research, and then I ended up on Amazon looking for a book on sleep paralysis, and I saw one called Sleep Paralysis: What It Is and How to Stop It. I think it was by somebody named Chris White. It was so blunt, like what it is and how to stop it. I was like, okay, that's what I need. How do I stop this? So I got the book, and I just remember looking through the chapters at the beginning, and I went to this page. I didn't even read the book. I just went to this specific page. For some reason, the chapter name caught my attention, and I went to this page. And I don't remember exactly everything it said, but I just remember that it said, when you're having these attacks, call on the name of Jesus. And I got so mad. I got so mad. I was just like swearing. I was so angry. Like, that was the last thing I wanted to hear. Anything about God or Jesus, I used to make fun of it. I didn't even want to have anything to do with it. I was like, this is ridiculous. I was angry. I was really angry. And So, so it was either, I don't know if it was that night or the next night. Um, I was just so desperate by this point because I was so exhausted. I was depriving myself of sleep. I couldn't function, and like the whole thing was just out of control. I mean, it had gotten so bad, the attacks at that point, that I would start seeing these things. Okay, they're really tall. The ones I saw, they were like several feet tall. They were black. They were upright. They didn't look like humans, but they resembled the form. They were just really, really tall, and they would be coming toward me. And it was just getting so intense, I couldn't function anymore. It was horrifying. So, um, that night, or the night after, like I said, I remember falling asleep in the middle of the night, and I had an attack. And in my mind, I started to just say, Jesus, save me, over and over. And I think it only took a few tries, and I woke up like that. And I forgot to mention, this is actually really important. Like I said, I had these attacks for years, since, I don't even know how long. I've had countless attacks, and I could never wake myself up. I would always wake up eventually, I don't know how, but in the middle of an attack, I could never wake myself up. I remember like, when I finally did wake up, when it just, like, ended or whatever, I would be choking and not breathing. Like, it would be really, really bad and really horrifying. And this happened, I don't even know how many times. I could never wake myself up. And this time, when I called on Jesus' name, I woke up. And this was in the middle of the night, and I was so terrified. I was dumbfounded and terrified at the same time. Because I woke up for the first time, but also horrified, because as always, it was so horrible going through this. So I just tried to stay awake again. I stayed awake and I stayed awake, but this time it was really different, because I was just sitting in bed. I was sitting right here, actually, and I could remember feeling this thing in the room. It was like a heaviness, a dark heaviness. I don't know how else to describe it. I just knew that it was still in the room. And I stayed awake, trying to distract myself, until I remember looking at the clock. The last time I looked at the clock, it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and I fell asleep, and I had another attack, only this time it was the most intense, the most vivid attack that I've ever had. I'm not going to say exactly what was going on, because it's disturbing, but I knew immediately that those things, because I was reaching for God finally, I knew that they were trying to put me in my place. And I said, Jesus, save me, a couple times again, and I woke up. And that was the last time that I had attacks like that. And I just remember being absolutely elated at that point, because then I knew that Jesus was real. I couldn't, it was just undeniable. And so after that, I started believing. I confessed my sins. I cried for like an hour. I was so just going your whole life without believing, having no hope, believing in nothing, not believing in God, not believing in Jesus, just not having hope my whole life. It broke me. And And I confessed all my sins and I cried like a baby. And I made an authentic effort to start following him. I changed so rapidly that I didn't even know myself. And this is going to get into the second part of my testimony. I just have to... Okay. So... the bulk of the changes that took place in me were in the first few days and then in the next few months. And I'm asking people to really listen to this part carefully and really consider what I'm saying. Okay? So, in the first few days, I just felt different in ways that I couldn't explain. I felt darkness starting to drain out of me. I stopped being angry. I stopped hating people. This is the first few days and the first few months again. I started loving people that I used to hate. If you've hated somebody, imagine loving them through and through, like loving them and feeling compassion for them. I stopped being depressed. No more depression. It was just gone. No more crying. No more thoughts of suicide. My pornography addiction stopped. My stealing addiction stopped. And in those first few months, I felt like I was being emptied out of all of that darkness. It's so heavy. You realize it when you have it, but you don't realize it until it's gone, how heavy it actually is. It just drained out of me, and I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I didn't even know myself anymore, in the good way. It was unsettling, but it's the best unsettling feeling I've ever had in my life. I really want you to stop and think about what I just said, okay? Do any of you know what a pornography addiction is like? That I had that for decades. That I had depression for even longer, for decades. Anger and hatred for decades. Stealing compulsively for decades. Do you understand how many years of therapy it would take to get rid of even one of those problems? And with no relapses. I have had no problems with these things since that day. Since I started believing in Jesus. No therapy, no medications, just Jesus Christ. Please think about that, okay? That stuff is impossible if it's not God. It's impossible. I started feeling at peace in my heart. Peace in my heart? Seriously? I never felt that in my life. I started feeling joy. When I felt joy for the first time, all I was doing was walking across the room to go get something, and this feeling of joy washed over me that I'd never felt before, and I knew immediately that it was joy, and I knew immediately that it was from God, and I cried because I never felt that in my entire life. Let me see. Okay, getting emotional. Gotta consult the list. That's really the bulk of it. I mean, again, I just want to revisit that point that I just made. about, you know, all the problems I had festering for so long. I mean, it takes years and years for this stuff to build up and build up and build up. And like any addiction, the longer you have it, you know, the less hope without the Lord there is of shaking it. Um, so, where I'm at now is the best place I've ever been in my life. I love Jesus. I love God more than anything. I want to serve them with my life. My desire for them is so great. You know, I'm still a baby Christian. I need lots of prayer. If any of you guys are willing to pray for me, I thank you and I love you for it. Even if you don't pray for me, I still love you. I've just never been so happy in my life, regardless of my circumstances. That's the thing about the Lord is, you know, you can have terrible circumstances going on in your life where your faith is tested. But if you cling to the Lord and you do your best to obey and to follow the commands of Jesus, He'll be with you. He'll be with you. He'll guide you. And you'll be able to go through things. Oh, this has happened to me so many times. You'll be able to make it through things that you never would have been able to make it through in 1,000 years. I've gone through some things since starting to believe in God where, quite frankly, because I was suicidal before, I would not be sitting here right now in front of you if it weren't for God. If I had gone through these things without Him, I would have killed myself for sure. He just, you know, if you follow Him and you do your best to obey Him and to search authentically from your heart for Him and for His truth, and, you know, humble yourself before Him always. Humbling yourself isn't easy, but you can ask Him to help you with that. He'll help you. If you ask authentically from your heart, He'll give you, you know, anything that brings you and He closer and closer together. You just have to be patient and persist. So, oh gosh, I don't know what to say now. I think that's basically it. But I just wanted to say, you know, for anybody who's having these problems, please don't brush off what I said. You know, I used to brush off stuff like that all the time. I never used to believe in God, and look what He did to my life. Look what He did to my life. Look what He did to my heart. I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for Him. If you are struggling in any way, even if it's with minor things, because if you have those minor things and they go unchecked, over the years they could get more and more and more serious. So even if you're dealing with just a little bit of loneliness, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but obviously if you're dealing with more serious things, just talk to Jesus. Just talk to Him every day. Just rip open your heart. Just be completely raw and completely honest. He hears every word with great love. Jesus and God the Father, like, they love you. They love you. Don't let the devil convince you that you're not worthy, that you're unlovable, that God's not going to forgive you for your sins because you've done this and this and it's too terrible. That's a lie from the devil. Just talk to Jesus and persist in talking to Him, even if you doubt that He exists. There's something in the Bible, I'm terrible at remembering Bible chapters and Bible verses, but there's a man who goes to Jesus and has a son that's really sick and desperately needs him to be cured, desperately wants him to be cured, and goes to Jesus, but he says, I believe, but help my unbelief, meaning like he wants to believe, but he still doubts, which is so many people, you know, and Jesus helps him. He does. He heals the man's son. So even if you doubt, tell the Lord that you have problems doubting. Ask him to show himself to you and persist in doing it. And don't give up, because he hears every word. He sees the desires of your heart. And if you show him that you're truly seeking him, he is going to show himself to you, period. It's a promise. You know, that Bible verse you've probably heard, even if you haven't read the Bible, that seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open to you. It will be open to you. It's a promise. If you truly seek him, he's going to show himself to you. So just try talking to him and don't give up, because he hears every word. The devil's going to try to get you to believe that he doesn't. He's trying to get you to believe that he doesn't exist, that he doesn't love you. There's going to be so many lies he tries to put in your head, but the reality is that God made you. He loves you. You're precious to him, and he wants to save your soul. And if you truly seek him, just start talking to Jesus, start talking to God. They're going to show themselves to you. Okay? So, I love you guys. I could go on about this forever. I already feel like I'm rambling. But I love you guys. Feel free to comment and ask questions. You're never bothering me. I love talking about God. I could talk about him forever. So, you know, conversations, comments, even if you disagree completely, leave a comment. I'm not going to judge you, because remember, I never used to believe in God. I used to think it was a bunch of garbage. I used to make fun of it, okay? So I'm never going to look down on people for leaving comments, you know, where they say, I don't believe in God, I think you're stupid, or, you know, stuff like that. Because I understand exactly how you feel inside. Because I used to think the same way. So, okay, I love you guys. I'm going to go now. All right, God bless you. Bye-bye. Okay, this is kind of not exactly a part 2 to my testimony. It's a continuation of part 1, because I forgot to mention something important. Remember when I was talking about how when I was 13 I started getting involved with girls, and that continued throughout my life. And the pornography addiction I had, most of it was with women. That was the bulk of my pornography addiction, was women. And when I started believing in Jesus, I kind of did the same thing in my testimony that happened to me in real life. When I started believing in Jesus, I was so overwhelmed by all the changes that took place in me. You know, I wasn't angry anymore, I didn't hate people anymore, the depression was gone, the pornography and stealing addictions were gone, and I was changing so much, so quickly. I didn't even realize until 3 months after I started believing in Jesus that I wasn't attracted to women anymore. Okay? I realize that this is probably a huge issue for a lot of people. I know this is a very sensitive topic. I know it's a sensitive topic because I used to be involved with women. When I was 19, I thought I was in love with one. I truly, you know, like, I was on the other side of it. I knew what it was like to get weird looks from other people because you were with a girl. Like, I understand that whole side of it. I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm not trying to be hateful, obviously, toward anybody who is gay or bisexual or whatever. I'm just trying to relay my experience, what happened to me. And it is what I said. 3 months after I started believing in Jesus, I realized that I was not attracted to women anymore. And this goes along with all the other things, like my pornography and stealing addictions. Those stopped. Like, one thing I really wanted to mention was, some people may think that just because I started believing in Jesus, that I thought that I couldn't do these things anymore. Like, oh, now I gotta change. I just gotta stop doing these things. I really have to emphasize that I stopped desiring to steal. I stopped desiring to view porn, and I stopped being attracted to women. Like, these things were not in me anymore. That's why they stopped. There's a big difference between you know, intentionally trying to stop a habit, but still desiring it on the inside, and not desiring it anymore, and not feeling it anymore, like it's just gone, and having no problems with it since then. There's a huge difference. And this is what happened to me. That doesn't mean that, just because you start believing in Jesus, that, he'll do the same thing. He might do the same thing. He might take away more problems than he took away from me. He might take away less. God has a different way of dealing with everybody. He knows what we need and when we need it. So, you can't look at one person's experience and be like, okay, this is exactly what's going to happen with me. So I think that's all I wanted to say about that. Again, if there are any questions or comments, because I know, the bisexuality and gay, and trans, like all those issues, like I know it's a very sensitive issue, and I've been on the other side of it. I'm very sensitive towards those things. And I'm not going to look down on anybody for having different views or opinions. Again, I'm just trying to express what happened to me after I started believing. And that's all. Okay, so I love you guys.